Hi there, my name is Josh Holmes, and I am recording a talk that I did at first on Coder Cruise, which is a great conference. It's actually on a cruise ship, but it's actually a technical conference, but it's very intimate, so you get to know everybody, and it's a cruise. It's kind of awesome. Anyways, mentorship matters, because A, mentorship does matter, and B, this talk is about the matters of mentorship from my perspective. So my name is Josh Holmes. I am Principal Dev Lead at Microsoft. I've been in the industry for good gravy, 25 years or so. And mentors have always been an incredibly strong part of everything that I've done in the industry. And so I just wanted to share this content and talk about mentorship and so on and so forth. The reason I'm recording this is that there was somebody who asked earlier, do you have a mentor, and then how do you get mentors, and so on and so forth. So I thought about this talk and wanted to go ahead and record this, and I'll be posting this on Twitter. So as me, you can find me on Twitter at Josh Holmes. You can find my blog at joshholmes.com, and so on. So I am a perpetual learner, right? So the more I learn how little I know. That's a direct quote from Socrates. Turns out he was a pretty smart fellow. I really, am beginning to grasp how much I don't know. And so my take on life is that personally, I figured out that I am closer to the index than I am the encyclopedia. So what that means is that I may or may not know the answer, but I know who does. And I know who does because I have a strong mentor network, and I've got a strong network of people that I reach out to and get advice from. So if you go to dictionary.com and ask them what a mentor is, they talk about, as a noun, it's a wise and trusted counselor or teacher, influential senior sponsor or supporter, blah, 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 blah. For me, it's someone you seek and take advice from, right? So one of the things that I'll talk about a little bit later on is this idea that the industry is termed reverse mentoring. That's not reverse mentoring. Is getting another perspective, which is mentoring. And it's the idea of senior people going and talking to people who are more junior in career, early in career, and finding out what their perspective is on XYZ technology, XYZ movement in the industry, et cetera, but it's getting a perspective that isn't yours. That is mentorship. That is going and approaching a mentor and asking for advice. So seek and take advice from, right? So this talk is broken into basically three big chunks. How have mentors shaped me? Okay, both personally and professionally. How does one approach a mentor? And then how should one be a mentor? Right, so those are the three big categories that I'm going to talk about. So first, let's talk about how mentors have shaped me. And I've had so many people who have mentored me in my life, and I could stop and I could talk about each and every single one of them. So Cal Evans, Uncle Cal, he is the godfather of the PHP community. He's taught me so much about driving community and really putting community before everything else, because that is so important, and it is how I have developed so fast in my career, how he has developed in his career, etc. Mark Hinsbo used to be a VP here at Microsoft. He's now a VP at a different company. I value that because I go to him all the time for career advice. And since he was at Microsoft and is now outside of Microsoft, he's got a beautiful perspective that goes beyond what I'm able to do. Dianne Bigley was my first technical mentor directly out of college. She taught me a ton. One of my second big mentors, and I'll talk more about what he's done in a little bit, but Denny Williford. So many people here have taught me so much. This is a short list. right? So this is a partial list of people who have taught me things over time. And if you pause here and take a look through, you might see names that you know, you might see names you don't know, but there's a ton of people on this list that I have continually gone to for advice, that I've continually gone to for mentorship, whether they know it or not. Everybody on this list is a mentor of mine, and has, you know, that I go to for questions, right? So, but I'm going to highlight and talk about a few of them, and kind of, you know, I picked a few, kind of threw a dart at this, and came up with some, and how they have influenced me. So first, let's talk about family. Okay, family. This is an incredible shaper of who you are as a person, personally and professionally. Personally, you know, Paul Byrd he's a lawyer, so not in the technical field, but he was very early in my life such a strong influence on me, strong impact on who I am, how I deal with things, how I deal with people, always spending time with people, always putting them first. You know, he taught me a bunch about negotiation and other things. But really, when it comes to family, I want to talk about Frances Dolly Hardin, right? So Frances Hardin Byrd, B-Y-R-D, was her married name. Dolly, or Dolly Francis, or Shorty Francis. You know, she amazing woman. She taught me how to shoot a gun. It was fun because, you know, all the boys would go down to the farm, and they'd, you know, take turns trying to shoot acorns out of the tree, or pecans, actually. It was pecans out of the tree. And then she'd say, "Here, you know, mind if I give it a go?" And they'd hand her the rifle, and she would shoot the stems of the pecans. And, you know, because she was a better shot than any of them. She won free throw contest. She cooked for battalions of men, literally battalions of men. She stood by her husband as he suffered through tuberculosis, which at the time was a death sentence. He lost a lung, but she stayed by him, and he lived through it. And she helped that same man campaign to become a Supreme Court justice, but she ran his campaign. Right? She taught me the value of relationships. She taught me the value of spending time with someone, and she's taught me the meaning of the phrase unconditional love. So she taught me a bunch, and my tattoo, which is over my heart here, is her. It's a rose and it's a hummingbird, because those two things signify her to me, and then also the GPS coordinates for the tire swing that is in the front yard that every single one of the grandkids grew up swinging on. So, big influence on me. Teachers, you know, obviously they are paid to be in that relationship where they're teaching you stuff, but some teachers take that extra step and are actually mentors as well as simply teachers. And Denny Williford, this was you know, I talked about him a little bit briefly. He's the second technical mentor that I had. The way that I got introduced to Denny was the company that I was at, Altel Information Services. They were, you know, they figured out they couldn't hire the top grad from MIT or Harvard or, you know, Ivy League schools, but they could hire top grad from, you know, all these other regional colleges. So Louisiana Tech, University of Arkansas, and so on and so forth. And then they would put them in a 6-month training class that Denny here was, you know, he's the one who put this together. He's the one who designed the course and taught it, right? And he said, if you can, at the end of this course, look at code that you wrote before the course and not throw up in your mouth a little bit, I'll buy you a steak dinner. He never had to buy a steak dinner, because in that course, not only did he teach you the technologies and the programming and that kind of stuff, he taught you the value of engineering fundamentals, right? So he taught testing, which was unheard of back in the mid-90s. He taught, you know, how to name functions, how to size functions properly. He taught, you know, object-oriented programming, and, you know, the ideas of cohesion and loosely coupled, and the value of interfaces. He taught a ton of things and really taught me the value of engineering fundamentals, and that has been something that has carried with me through the rest of my career. So Denny Williford, coach, mentor, tech lead, etc. A handful of these people have been managers. You know, and this is something that I want to be very, very crisp on, very clear on. I have been very fortunate to have some strong managers in my life. But one of the things that Denny Williford taught me, which I think was incredibly important, is that the company picks your manager. The team will pick their own leaders. Okay. Also, you get to pick your own mentors. Right. Because your manager is your manager does not mean that you have to look at them as the idol and to look up to and to try to model them. Oftentimes, your manager is there because the company put them there. Right. It's up to you as to whether or not they are a leader and a mentor to you. So, but I've been very fortunate in this. Nathan Hancock, he's out of Dallas. He was my manager, and the best manager that I've ever had. Taught me a ton. Okay, a lot of my management philosophy comes from Nathan. So I remember very distinctly our first one-on-one. I remember where I was standing. I was standing on a friend's porch in Raleigh, North Carolina. I remember the conversation. I remember every single word that was said because it stood out so strongly for me, and I did not realize how much that conversation was going to change my life. One of the things that Nathan said, which just blew me away, was he said, there's a lot of managers that want to figure out your strengths and your weaknesses, and they want to figure out how to work on your weaknesses. He said, nah, screw that. What I want to do is I want to figure out your strengths and your weaknesses. I want to figure out how to mitigate your weaknesses and play to your strengths. That's how you become a high performer. It's like, that sounds awesome. I am on board with this program. I don't believe you. I don't know how this works. And so the way that worked was, as an example, that year we had to, you know, I was running the BizSpark program, BIZSPARK, which was Microsoft's early startup program. And in those first years, wasn't very well known. Nobody knew what it was. And, you know, but we had some big goals, right? And so my section of the U.S. I owned a third of the U.S. from this program's perspective, and I needed to get 6,000 startups to start up on this program and sign up. And so Nathan, we sat down and we started brainstorming, and he said, how do we reach 6,000 startups? And you know, we were like, well, you know, we could do an email campaign. Email goes to the junk bin folder. We could do an online campaign, but those are historically fairly expensive, unpredictable results. We don't know exactly. So what do we do? What do we do? Well, we could mail them a letter, a physical letter. And yeah, but a lot of people throw physical letters away. But everybody opens a box. Huh. What can we do with that? Well, it turns out that we had tens of thousands of items of swag, coffee cups, t-shirts, little tchotchkes, calendars, etc., laying about in marketing closets that weren't being used. So it's basically free to us because it's already been paid for by a different group. Okay. All this says Microsoft, or some of it said BizSpark, you know, different programs, Microsoft Office, whatever. Great. And so we figured out where we could find lists of startups and so on and so forth. And I wrote a letter, and then Nathan helped me hire vendors, so people who are really good at stuffing boxes and mailing stuff. They collated the lists. They stuffed every box. They Xeroxed my letter, stuffed it in every box. We had over 10,000 startups sign up in the middle of the United States. That was fantastic. And the rest of the world started looking at that and going, hey, how do we replicate that? And they all started doing the similar type of a program. Nathan, mitigate your weaknesses, play to your strengths. The other one that I always really liked was, he said, is this really a problem, or is this just Josh likes to complain? Taught me a bunch about myself, taught me a bunch about him, and so on in that one little sentence. It was brilliant. So, coworkers. Lots of different coworkers over time. Joe Long is a coworker here at Microsoft. He is a distinguished engineer. I have really enjoyed getting to know him. You'll see a question later on in the what mentors should be asking that comes directly from Joe. And that was, why do you think that they acted that way? Not just what did they do. Why do you think they acted that way? Why do you think, what is it about their personality, what is it about them that, and their perspective that gave them that view on the situation, and why did they make that decision? Not just what did they do, but why did they do it? Now, once you understand the underlying motivations, then you can dig into it. You know, I had implicitly done that some accidentally. With Joe as my mentor, I have learned to do that far more deliberately and intentionally put myself in their shoes and think about their motivations and so on and so forth. Business partners, I've had business partners throughout my career. You know, I've owned and sold a bunch of different businesses, but in my previous business right before I joined Microsoft, Bill Wagner and Dianne Marsh were my business partners. Dianne, business partner, friend, mother, architect, developer, director of device and content security at Netflix. When she left our group and went to Netflix, she had a hand in designing that the cloud architecture there. She had a hand in designing KS Monkey. She had a hand in in building that. She is now the director of device and content security at Netflix. So much smarter than I am is really what I'm trying to say there. All around badass. She taught me a ton about how to do business, how to put the customer first every single time, because that was one of her big strengths. And then also, you know, how to build big multi-threaded systems that are able to function at hyperscale. So she taught me a bunch. In life, there are so many people in my life that have affected me, that I've gone to for mentorship, that I've gone to for coaching. Jim Weirich, friend, open source contributor, speaker, Rubiest. He's known as Santa Ruby. Unfortunately, he passed away some number of years ago, but I happened to have the pleasure of speaking with him in January before he passed away, I think in February or March. And he taught me so much about public speaking and about the value of community and being with people. Just an absolutely amazing mentor and coach, etc. Career-wise, Tracey Trewin has been a rock over the last 7 years in my career. At Microsoft, she's moved me from, if you're at Microsoft, level 64 to level 66. So she's moved me from being a senior developer to being a principal developer, and really helped me understand how to intentionally do things in my career, how to intentionally do things with my networking that will help my career, but also just how to operate at those senior levels and really help me think through problems. I love working with Tracey Trewin, and she's just been an amazing rock in my career, you know, as a mentor, as a manager, and as a life coach. Negotiation. I talked a little bit about Paul Byrd, my uncle, and how he started teaching me that early. But I learned a bunch about negotiation with this guy named John Dennehy. John Dennehy is the CEO of HR Locker. And I went to the launch party when they finally got to V1. They released it, and now they had a dev crew and a design crew that were going to be sitting around and waiting while they got customers in to get new feature requests and bugs and that kind of stuff. And so he was like, "Hey, I've got an idea for this new company, Zartis, and what do you think about this idea?" And he pitched his idea, and they said, "Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do that." I was like, "Okay, all right." And then 6 weeks later, so 6 weeks from literally at drinks at the pub celebrating the launch of HR Locker, he landed his first paying customer, Lufthansa Airlines. I was like, "Whoa, really?" That's a negotiation, right? He was able to land that customer because he was able to negotiate with them around the new feature set, around what their requirements were going to be, how to scale it in their environment, and them coming on and paying early meant that they had a disproportionate say in how this was being built. Fantastic, great negotiation. I learned a ton. Spiritual. Russell Mason, he and I worked together in our first job out of college, and he actually had the cubicle directly opposite of me, and it's the only time in my entire career that I've been able to work and program without wearing headphones. I'm sitting there and I hear him singing gospel hymns to himself underneath, under his voice, and I was just like I was incredibly happy just listening to him, talking to him, and getting his perspective, really understanding how to put, how to be true to himself and how to put his family and his faith first in every single thing that he did. I've learned so much from him, as a programmer, as a teacher, as a manager, as a singer. I can't sing. I listen to him sing. He's a preacher. He's a family man. I've learned so much from this man, Russell Mason. Technical, Jennifer Marsman, data scientist. Many of you might know her. She's amazing. I've learned about community building from her. I've learned about how to run large-scale campaigns from her. I've also learned a lot about machine learning, data science, etc. And I continually go to her for her perspective on my career, on technical problems, on lots and lots of things, because she's just a tremendous amount of awesome. Skip through a few of these. There's a bunch of these that are, I've had business relationships with. Every single one of these is a friend, and so much more. In the original version of this talk, I talked about Matt Trask, and one of the things that I'm very passionate about, if you've watched me on Twitter or Facebook or in my talks, is mental illness. Matt Trask is one of the speakers for OSMI, and I was a big supporter of OSMI, but I listened to his talk, and I'm sitting there thinking about, as he's describing depression, and I was like, whoa, to borrow a phrase from another friend of mine, I'm on that table you're shaking. So, I'm sitting there listening to this, and I'm like, that sounds like me. That sounds like me too. That sounds like me too. So afterwards, I went up and I quizzed him and I talked to him, and I didn't say, it was a lot of asking for a friend. I'm the friend, by the way, and realized that I had been suffering from depression for quite a long time. Matt also suffers from depression. He's very open about it. I'm much more open about it than I used to be. A, I didn't realize it. B, when I did realize it, I went into this deep funk of, I'm embarrassed about this, etc., etc. Turns out a lot of people suffer from depression, and that is just one of the things that you got to deal with, and talking about it helps. It really, really does. Matt was trying to do a bunch of things where he was losing weight, and I offered to raise money to help him buy new camera lenses, because that's one of his big passions. Biking is another big passion. So Bitly supporting Matt Trask was to use an old campaign. I want to revive this, because I want to give Matt some new goals and see if we can get him to get back on the train of losing a bunch of weight and take care of himself and so on and so forth. All right. Mentors have obviously shaped me in all walks of my life and have come into my life from a lot of different vectors. But how do you approach a mentor? Okay. So I'm going to start by talking about this guy named Cameron Evans. Cameron, amazing speaker, amazingly charismatic person. I watched him operate, for a while. He was in the academic space in sales at Microsoft. And I watched him, and he was just so smooth and charismatic, and I was just like, wow, I love this guy. He had on his business card, his title was Chief Purveyor of Disruptive Innovation. It's like, what? That is the badassest title that I've ever seen. I want to learn from him. So I went up to him, eager little puppy, and I was like, will you be my mentor? And he did something that I, A, did not expect, and B, taught me more than he could probably understand. He said, no. It's like, wait, what? It's like, first of all, what do you want to, what is it about me that you're approaching for? What do you think that I can offer you? How much time do you want? What kind of format do you want? And he started asking all these really specific and detailed questions, and I was like, oh. And he taught me so much in that minute. It just blew me away. And he doesn't know this, but I've kept asking him questions. And he's a mentor. He doesn't realize that. Shh, don't tell him. But I still go to him with questions occasionally. So, will you be my mentor? Don't ask that, right? Who is this person? Why this person is approaching you? Why are they, what do you think that they can offer you? How much of a time commitment is this? How long is this relationship going to be? In short, what is the mentor signing up for? Okay. Who should you approach? Very important. A lot of people don't think about who they should approach, right? So first, a lot of people think about knowledge, right? They have knowledge that I want. I'm going to see if I can go get that knowledge. That's great. Perspective. How is their perspective different from yours, right? Is it time and role? Have they just been here longer? Are they older? Are they younger? Do they have a different gender? Do they have a different sexual orientation? Do they have, how is it that their perspective is different from yours, right? Are they doing a different job? Is it a different discipline? Is it related? Are they inside your company? Are they outside your company? Are they a former employee? Are they a former manager? All of these things go into perspective. Last thing is network, right? Is it somebody you know? Is it somebody you don't know? Are they inside the company? Are they outside the company? Are they inside your group? Are they outside your group? So on this, very specifically, I intentionally keep 3 long-term mentorship relationships going at any given point in time. One of those is inside of my group, and that is somebody who tends to have been there longer than I have, or has a more senior perspective than I do, right? And I go to them and ask them advice, about my career, about things that are going on in the group. I ask them a whole bunch of different questions over time, and I currently actually have 2 of those. Right, I have Tracey Trewin and Joe Long. So those are my 2 inside of my group, inside of Microsoft mentors that I go to very, very regularly. Then I have somebody outside of my group that is still inside the company. So Microsoft is big enough that I can do this. If you're in a smaller company, you may not be able to do this, but I always have at larger companies somebody who is outside of my group, but inside of the company that can give me perspective on things that are happening at the company level without the bias of my local group. And so for that, there's a lady named Megan Perez. She's a general engineering manager on the Edge product team. I was partnered with her when I was on the Edge product team. I just find her advice so valuable, and she's got a very different perspective than I do. She's been at Microsoft longer. She's a different gender. She's got a different age. She, has been in different parts of the company. She's worked with almost everybody inside of Microsoft because she was here when it was a much smaller company. But she knows CSE well enough to know the perspective, but she's not biased towards it, and she's able to give me that perspective on CSE and on things that are happening inside of CSE that are different from what I would get inside of it, right? The third type of mentor that I have, again, long-term relationship, is outside the company, who can give me perspective on things that are happening inside the company from an industry's viewpoint. And for that, Mark Hinsbo, I talked about briefly, he was a VP at Microsoft. He's left, so he knows Microsoft, but he's not an insider anymore. And so his perspective is broader and wider than the people that are still here at Microsoft. So, one inside your group, typically more senior than you, one outside of your group, but still inside the company to give you perspective without being biased by the group itself. And then third is that really wide industry level perspective of somebody outside of your company. So those are the 3 mentors that I have. Then I have a lot more people that I go to for advice for more tactical stuff. So I'll go to somebody much more junior than I am and ask them for their perspective. Okay, because they have a different perspective than I do, and every perspective is valuable. And now it's up to me as to whether or not I listen to that perspective and take action based on that, or whether I take that and I just fold it into the rest of the learnings that I have. And like, it's up to me what I do with that advice and with that perspective. But every perspective is valuable. Go get that perspective. So what topics do you want to talk to them about? Is it career? Is it skill-based? Is it personal? Is it networking? What type of mentorship, right? Is it a formal, hello, I would like for you to be my mentor? Is it informal? So me and Cameron, right? He doesn't know that he's my mentor. I email him stuff. He emails me back. It's fantastic. Is it just you guys get together for coffee every once in a while? Or is it a group thing, right? So one of the things that I suggested to one of my employees is, to put together a small group of people who are at a particular stage in their career and have a particular set of biases or genders, or they've got a particular perspective. Then as a group, go approach somebody much more senior whose time they would have a hard time getting individually, but as a group, all of a sudden it's really interesting, right? And they're able to go as a group and have a meeting with somebody who they otherwise wouldn't have been able to get a meeting with. So is it formal? Is it informal? Is it a group type of a thing? What type of time commitment is it, right? Me and Cameron, we email. Me and Ivan Judson, who I haven't talked about yet, but he and I just get coffee every once in a while. Joe Long and I go to lunch all the time, right? But we also have reoccurring meetings. So how much of a time commitment is it when you are approaching a mentor? This is how somebody approached me recently. They said, I admire your ability to speak in front of large audience with what feels like relative ease. I've given a few talks, but it's not comfortable yet. Would you be willing to meet for a coffee and go over my next talk that I'm working on? Yes, absolutely. I know why you're approaching me. I know what you want from me. I know the time commitment, and we have an agenda all ready for the meeting. Woo! That is absolutely the right way to approach a mentor. I'm a software developer and be curious about getting into the architecture side of the business. You're well respected as an architect. Would it be possible to shadow you on your next project to learn more about being an architect? I like the concept. I will give you a tentative yes. However, there's lots of contingencies, like, is your manager okay with you following me and shadowing me on this next project, and so on and so forth? I already know how much work I put into that, and so, what's the delta in the extra amount of work that I'm going to be doing, etc. So it's a tentative yes. I love the concept. I love how direct, how pointed, how actionable this was. How to use the time. Make sure you lay out the relevant content. Ask lots of questions and answer their questions. Okay? Answer their questions as honestly as you can be. If you're lying to your mentor, they're not going to be able to help you. So be honest with them, be upfront with them, and lay out the relevant context. You don't need to give them the entirety of the encyclopedia worth of context. What context do they need? Ask a bunch of questions, answer their questions. Say thank you. Mentor just spent their most valuable commodity, that is time, and they spent that on you. And so even if you didn't get a whole lot out of it immediately, you need to reflect on what they said. You need to start thinking about what perspective do they give you? How does that perspective actually change how you're thinking about things, et cetera, et cetera. But very importantly, say thank you. This is how you get that additional meeting. Lastly, how should you be a mentor? Gail Craig is a fantastic friend of mine from Ohio. She is a Rubiest. She's a developer. She's a community builder. She is a lot of amazing. I was blown away with her knowledge, her depth of knowledge. And so I asked her if she'd be willing to give a talk at a group, and she said, I don't do public speaking. It makes me really nervous. And I kept going, kept asking, and really probably bullied her into it. She relented. She said, yes, I'll go do it. And she crushed it. She did an amazing job, dropped a tremendous amount of knowledge. doesn't remember the talk, blanked out during the talk. She was so nervous and she did not enjoy it. Great, awesome. She now knows that. She has since come back and thanked me for getting her to go do that first talk, because she learned that that's not how she wants to impart knowledge. She does great in one-on-one. She does great in paired programming. She does great in writing. She has a tremendous number of ways that she can distill that knowledge from her head into somebody else. But public speaking is not it, right? So be true to yourself. Figure out what works for you and how you can impart knowledge. But when you are imparting knowledge, don't just dump advice on somebody. You need to be invited. All right. You don't have to wait to be invited necessarily. You can say, "Would you like some help with X?" That goes a long way. But don't just come in and jump in and start drilling somebody with advice that they didn't ask for, that they don't want. Right. And don't be offended if they say no. Remember, your time is incredibly important, and if they don't want to spend your time, okay, great, that's fine. Move on. Somebody else may want that advice. They may not want that advice, but don't just dump advice. Make sure that you are invited in. If somebody does invite you in, insist on definition, right? Why you? What can you offer them? What topics? How much of time commitment? In short, all the stuff that Cameron taught me is you need to be very, very clear on expectations and so on and so forth. Be flattered. This mentee wants your perspective, and that's a chance to help. Don't be a self-important jackass. This is not how you're going to go build an empire. This is not how you're going to go rule the world. But you also need to guard your time. Cameron showed me how to do that. There are lots of other ways to do that, but you can manage the time commitment. You can manage. Hey, that sounds like a great topic that you want to talk about. Sounds like an email. How about we email back and forth a little bit, and then if warranted, we'll have a follow-up conversation. All right, et cetera, et cetera. Be humble. Realize that you are human. You have your own biases. So you are offering them perspective. You're offering them thoughts. What they decide to do with them, that is their business. You need to help the mentee think through a problem. Have you thought about it from X angle? Joe Long's question, why do you think they acted that way? Help them think through the problem. Give them that new perspective. Help them think through the problem, and then they can solve that problem from somebody else's perspective, which will help them learn more than if you just tell them what to go do. Okay? So, how have mentors shaped me? How does one approach a mentor? How should one be a mentor? Talk about all those things. Any questions, feel free to follow me up with me on Twitter. Feel free to ask them here on YouTube or in the comments on my blog. Any of those are valid conversation mediums for me. So, at Josh Holmes, happen to work at Microsoft, josh.holmes@microsoft.com, and joshholmes.com is my blog. Thank you very much.